Hi everyone. How are you guys? Let me know you're here by telling me who you are. I can't see who's here. Hi everyone, how are you? How have you guys been doing? It's been a long time, a few weeks. Hi Bina, how are you? It's been a long time, Bina. How are you doing? Hi Mom. So we're just gonna have a chat about spiritual sensitivity. So more so the not so fun things to deal with, like hypersensitivity and overstimulation, things of that nature. Awesome, that's so good to read. I hope you're doing well with your dissertating. I'm slow to it, but it will go. Working full-time and dissertating is not easy. Hi everyone else, come on in. Tell me who you are if you don't mind. I want this to be a conversation, so I want you to be honest and kind of also help me share by sharing your experiences as well. I don't know why I'm extra nervous to talk about this. I think because you never really master this. It's something you just keep working through. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and begin. I can't be here long. I have to teach a class at 7, so I'm just going to be on here a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of share my truth, share my tips, and feel free to also add your own. I would love to read them and try them. So yeah, share with me. So there's a ton of things going on in the natural and in the spirit. And I'm kind of, I think it's fairly the case for a lot of us that these are the types of seasons that kind of breed overstimulation in so many ways. So I figured we should talk about this. Plus, one of you mentioned that we should chat about mental health. And I think this is like the part of mental health. Well, this is an area where mental health meets spirituality. And so I definitely want to, plug that somehow into this discussion. So, I do want to also say this. One of you also recommended that I talk about Bible texts that are heavily misunderstood. Totally want to do that as well. Maybe on the live for next week. So if you guys will go ahead and write in the comments any type of Bible scriptures that you would like me to discuss, that would be great. And then I will utilize whatever scriptures you give me, and we will talk about that next time. So please do that. Feel free to DM me if you don't want to put it in the comments. Just direct message me any type of text that you will want me to talk about that are heavily misunderstood in the Bible, and we'll discuss that next week. So, lots of stuff going on today. Hi, Miss Felicia. Thanks for coming. So there are lots of people dreaming significantly more than they generally do in this time, and a lot of the dreams are somewhat unsettling for a lot of people, and that makes a ton of sense. There's a lot happening in the natural, right? You have COVID going on. In addition to all of that, you have this case regarding the death of George Floyd. You have police brutality occurring not only in the United States, but in other countries as well. So just a ton of natural stuff going on and more. But in addition, you have all of this spiritual stuff happening, right? Like there's a lot of spiritual activity going on that requires us to be more discerning, You know, it requires us to have some kind of consciousness concerning those doors that God is opening and those doors that God is shutting. Like, being on the side of God is not easy, right? Because I think people often want to think that God lives on I guess God lives in the black and white, but that's not really true. God mostly lives in the gray. God lives on the side of justice, and justice is super duper gray. So I think that's important to note. But there's also a lot of increased personal and mental stuff going on that's requiring a lot more care of self, and so I figured this will be a good topic to discuss, and you can consider this like a part 1, because there's lots to talk about in this area. My other business, eMerge&See Co., deals a lot more with this topic that we're discussing now. I have like a coaching service for those who do struggle with this. So if you do want a free consultation and you want to chat more about it, feel free to go over to eMerge&SeeCo.org and register for a free consultation, and we can chat more about this. Nonetheless, so and I'm looking at my notes, so please forgive me. I think the first thing that I should do is kind of talk a little bit more about like what it means to be overstimulated or to have hypersensitivity, and what it feels like how do these things manifest. So for the most part, it's to be overly sensitive, and that can be in a ton of ways. It can be in your 5 senses, it can be in your knowing sense, that 6th sense, but it could also just be it could manifest in your moods. You could just be up one day and down the next, up one moment and down the next. So it's not necessarily all about spiritual sensitivity. Some people experience overstimulation outside of their spiritual giftings or their spiritual selves. So that's also important for us to acknowledge too. This happens in every aspect of life, though a lot of my experiences with overstimulation occurs as a result of, what's going on with me spiritually. So I often think of the best way to describe overstimulation or hypersensitivity as being constantly bombarded. It's kind of like, having a cup and filling it with water, and then the cup filling up, and then you continue to fill it up with water. That's kind of how it feels. It feels like it's something that is overwhelming, something that you can't quite, excuse me guys, it's really loud. They're doing some maintenance outside in my apartment. Okay, that's a little bit better. But it looks like I don't know, it's just that overwhelming feeling, feeling like you're way too full. There's no opportunities to get rid of what you already have before getting more. Another image that comes to mind is like being in a space where there's just a ton of voices or a ton of images, and they're coming too quickly that you can't quite parse through the individual voices or images or impressions or whatnot before you get another. This happens to me a lot, sometimes more in certain places or with certain people. And then sometimes it's just a seasonal thing, and that season can last a really long time. So yeah, a lot of times this can manifest in a ton of ways. You could just not feel like you could do people or crowds really well. Sometimes there's a lack of motivation. Sometimes it manifests as some kind of lack of productivity, or reduced productivity. Sometimes there's increased anxiety. Some people have sleepless nights, or they find it really challenging to get to sleep initially. For some people, it's incessant dreaming. It feels like the dreams just don't stop. For others, it's you get a full night of sleep. You might sleep 7, 8, 9 hours, but you wake up and you feel like you didn't sleep at all. And as I mentioned earlier, for others, it might be changes in mood or changes in your emotions. You might find yourself easily triggered at times, or easily angered or easily saddened. And for others, it might even be a diminished appetite. You might have a diminished appetite, and that might be a sign of you being overstimulated or just really needing to pay more attention to what you're sensing, what you're feeling, where your sensitivity levels are. This kind of sounds a lot like, what a lot of people would experience when they're experiencing things like depression or anxiety attacks or panic attacks. It all just really differs. But I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that overstimulation and hypersensitivity occurs in every aspect of our lives as humans. And it looks different for a lot of people. And because of that, it's so easy to call these things like mood disorders or depression or high levels of anxiety. But it just simply might be that you have a spiritual gift that is very active. It might be that you're not reading the circumstances, like you're not reading your own bodily and mental communication well at the time. You're not adapting to new spaces. So it could very well look like a mental health issue at times, but it could just be that you need to sit down and actually think about what you are experiencing, what you are sensing, and ask tough questions. So I want to give you guys some tips, just a few tips to get through overstimulation or hypersensitivity. The first tip I have is pretty common. It's just to identify it. So you want to examine yourself. You want to look at your actions, your moods, your habits, and you want to acknowledge what's happening and be really upfront with yourself, even if you have to verbally declare it out of your mouth that you're overwhelmed, that you might be overstimulated. And then at that point, you can think about in what ways you might be being stimulated at that moment. I think another thing that you might want to do is change your perspective. So I think for a lot of people, when they experience things that look like stress or feel like pain or looks like a mental or anxiety disorder or psychological disorder, or they're experiencing something that seems unbearable, a lot of people would suggest that cannot be God. It is not God by any way, shape, or form. And in this way, because of the negative perspective, there's the lack of acknowledgement of what's really going on, and they try to satisfy or soothe themselves in all of these ways that don't quite work. It's because there's a need to change your perspective with what's happening. And I would say that one of the ways that occurs in quite often is, when you're completely done and overstimulated, essentially. So I think being able to acknowledge that, sensitivity or hypersensitivity comes with who you are. It's not just simply something that you have. A lot of people think of this as like, oh, this is just a gift that I have. It's a spiritual gift, and I think that the human is constantly reducing things, right? A must equal B kind of thing. But in that case, we take this gift as something that is temporary, as something that is given, something that can be rejected. But I think when it comes to sensitivities, whether they are spiritual sensitivities, whether they are sensitivities in your emotions, or however they might manifest, It's a part of who you are. It's not some kind of thing that you've been given that you can just give back or give away or ignore. If you can change your perspective and think of this, as something that you are, a part of who you are, then it becomes something permanent that you must fully embrace. Not something that you just need to tolerate or find a way to adjust to or accommodate, but something that you need to fully embrace and accept. And in that case, the work that you begin to do with this potential is one that works towards mastery, right? Like learning how to master this potential. And I'll say master in air quotes or in quotation marks, because you can't really, mastery is something that you can't really attain, right? It's something that you're constantly working towards. And it's part of just growth in itself. But changing your perspective so that this potential becomes something that you need to work towards mastery could help a tons. So when your gift, your potential feels more like a curse, then you can kind of shift your mentality to realize that this is more like a blessing. This is a part of who I am. This is something I must willingly work through. Another thing to keep in mind is mastery, or having this mentality that you need to work through mastery, is a really key aspect of being a good steward as well. It's something that, thinking of your potential as something you can master helps you to maintain this mentality that you must learn to have some form of control over your experiences, over your potential. And this in itself will give you the ability to consistently work towards mastery. And it is that work in itself that is pertinent to you being a proper partner with God. God doesn't, want us to be passive agents, but more so active agents. We are given potential. We are given gifts. We are allowed to take part in these encounters so that we can be active participants, right? And so that we can work with God as God's partner. That requires you to actually be an active agent, not a passive agent. So also really important here. Another thing you want to do is take deep breaths. I don't know if it's just me, and please tell me in the comments if you do this too. But sometimes when I'm in certain encounters and it just feels like a lot, I stop breathing. I don't know why. I always have to hear this voice in me that says, Toya, breathe, because I will totally stop breathing in an encounter. Kind of the opposite of what I've done when I've been super nervous and I've been expected to say certain things, which is, hyperventilation. I've been on all sides of this, all because I've refused to embrace this key aspect of my own identity. Another thing you want to do is you want to take care of yourself. Know yourself. Take really good care of yourself. You cannot allow yourself to go over to the grocery store, full of people at 5 p.m. if you are overstimulated, right? That's not smart. It's not. And if you're just hypersensitive and you're in a space where you just cannot deal with this, you might need to go later at night, earlier in the morning, Instacart, delivery through Whole Foods. Something like that. You have to take care of yourself, but also, taking care of your body, right? If you're one of those people who find peace and serenity, getting your nails done, go get your nails done. Take care of the parts of yourself that have less to do with your sensitivities or with your prophetic potential. Another tip I have is be honest with yourself. Be honest with God. Be honest with your close associates too. This means that you have to be willing to ask the really tough questions. Like, what am I feeling? What am I seeing? What am I experiencing? And asking yourself, after asking yourself even deeper questions after you're able to answer that. Why am I experiencing this? Am I experiencing anything else? Another thing that people often forget, and this is just like, let's just make this more basic: dreaming. Most of us dream. A lot of people will be really overwhelmed about this one dream that they had, and they will be more so overwhelmed about this one aspect of the dream and completely forget that the dream had other elements. Like, you had a dream before this, you probably had a dream after this. There were things that occurred in that dream before and after this moment that became really overwhelming. And those are really key to proper interpretation. The same thing here. Like, if you are overstimulated, odds are is you are probably feeling a ton of things. It's not just one thing, it's a ton. Or you're sensing, or you're seeing, or you're hearing, or you're smelling a ton of things. And so you have to allow yourself to process that. And sometimes allowing yourself to process that requires your imagination, which I'll get to really briefly. But you want to make sure that you're not running away from the plentifulness, right? Not running away from all of these impressions that you're getting. I am the queen of running away. Totally. I've seen myself literally walk out of visions. I do it all the time. And it's not something I'm super proud of to say that I do, though there is a little part of me that is very comfortable with being able to say that as well. Not only because it's the truth, but also because it speaks to how very reasonable God is. Like, how much agency we really have as humans. I'm not forced to stay, and it also in some ways reveal an area of immaturity that I need to work through. And that's me willingly choosing to stay in the experience, which is my next tip, that comes with your own honesty. You being honest with yourself, being honest with God, being honest with those people around you, choosing to stay in your experience or in your encounters and forcing yourself to parse through the impressions one at a time. You can do this in a ton of ways. Journaling really helps. A lot of times when I'm overstimulated or hypersensitive or just getting too much at one time, one of the things that I do is I have my iPad. For example, in church, I will just start writing on my iPad in church. And sometimes it helps to kind of draw what I'm seeing. So people think I'm over there doodling, like, oh, look at this 30-year-old doodling, 33-year-old doodling. I'm not doodling. Well, I am technically doodling, but it's productive doodling, But that's the only thing that can help me stay in the experience, diminish my discomfort, and somehow it also helps me to be present in the service too, because on one side of my notes, or one page on my iPad, I also have a page or a slot for taking notes, whatever's going on in the sermon. Nonetheless, writing has been really, really great. And drawing has been great too, even though I'm not a visual artist, not by any lengths. Another thing that helps a lot is imagination. So if you imagine your eyes, your spiritual eyes or your spiritual sensors as like a camera, or a camera lens, how you can narrow in on things and make the field of vision smaller or larger. You can imagine yourself doing that. I know it sounds weird, but it totally works. So if you are in those moments where you are just really super bombarded, you're having all of these visions, you're hearing all of these voices, there's just so much going on, focus on one. And see yourself narrowing the field of vision down to that one instance. Acknowledge what it is. Draft what it is if you must on paper, and seek resolution. That might just be, or a response, and that might just be that you might need to pray about that one instance, and then you could shift to another, seeing yourself expand your field of vision and shrinking it down to another thing that you're sensitive to. it's also kind of working your potential. So you're actually getting some good practice in that way too. But it's been a lifesaver at times, you know, when I've wanted to do the work. There are moments where you just don't want to do the work. We all get like that. But you must also know that it's okay to be a brat sometimes. Totally. I will totally acknowledge that I'm very spoiled by God, and I am certainly a brat oftentimes. Not proud of it, but I am gracious to myself about it now, or I'm learning to be gracious to myself concerning it. Mastery is a goal. It's not something that is completely attainable. It is just something that you have to continue working towards, right? Because you can't truly and completely really know yourself and expect there to still be some growth, right? The manifestation of truly knowing yourself is being, right? Like when you really know who you are, you just be it. I mean, if you can't be it, then it's probably because you really don't know it, right? So mastery isn't necessarily something that you know, it's not a one and done thing. There are stages to this, and there's always going to be ways that you can grow, always ways that you can get to know yourself, always better ways to exist in the world, better ways to show forth your ability to be. And making mistakes, having those moments where you just can't deal with this and you're probably being a little bit childish or immature or brat-like, you know, it's normal. Very much. Very, very normal. So those are my tips for now, you know. I've been known, you know, every so often to have that random moment where I just go on Facebook and I write some more tips. So I may do that. I might even share some of my old tips in the eMerge&See co-page at some point. So feel free to follow me there, where you will have access to all the other things that I post. But yeah, do you guys have any comments, questions, anything? Thank you, Miss Robin. Okay, so I'm going to run off of here. I have an hour and a half before I teach. So I hope you guys have a beautiful day, and I hope you take good care of yourself, especially in this crazy time. Have a nice day, you guys. Bye.